Megalopolis, the brand new epic from Francis Ford Coppola. In this video we will be diving straight into its deeper themes and symbolism. There will be spoilers. Let us begin.
Go. Now.
How do we build a better world? It's a timeless question. A question which has been on the lips of the most influential figures in history, even the bad ones. Some of our greatest atrocities have been committed in the name of progress. So what's a good kind of progress? Or to put it another way, what's the kind of progress that we need? Enter Megalopolis, a film which attempts to weigh in on this age-old debate. Fittingly, it plays with time. It takes accounts of ancient Rome and loosely transposes them to a reimagined modern United States. It's a clash of the old and the new, emphasising the truth that history has a way of repeating itself. The endless political power plays and attempts at creating a utopian society echo through the ages. Its protagonist, Caesar Catilina, is locked in conflict with Frank Cicero, the mayor of New Rome. These names reference the Catilinarian conspiracy of 63 BC, in which an aristocrat called Catiline tried and failed to overthrow Cicero's republic. In the film, Catilina is framed as a kind of underdog genius. It's not a rags to riches story, he already has immense influence when we first encounter him, but compared to the stable and conservative rule of Cicero, Catilina is seen as a wild card, risky and unpredictable, with controversial new ideas about how a city should be run. If he is to succeed, he needs to get people onto his side. He does possess the advantage of supernatural powers, and these came to him through tragedy. His wife, Sunny Hope, died in a car crash, and the grief of this loss somehow led to the creation of a new material called megalon. The film doesn't really explain this, and I kind of like the mystery. Through Sunny's death comes the possibility of new life in the form of this miracle material. Catilina can control megalon with his mind. He can use it to build the most remarkable structures, which integrate with biology. It also gives him the ability to freeze time, and it's even used as a skin graft to save his own life from a gunshot wound later in the film. Megalon represents the ideal creative tool. It seamlessly turns the dreams of the artist into reality. It is a mediator between the mind and the physical task of construction. And it's an emotional thing, supposedly formed from the loss of a loved one and rekindled later in the film when Catilina falls in love with Cicero's daughter, Julia. Megalon is a kind of manifestation of Catilina's own heart. Now, Coppola cites Metropolis as a key influence, the 1927 masterpiece of German expressionism directed by Fritz. And notably, that film begins with the words, "The mediator between brain and hands must be the heart." This is assumed to be true on the level of individual human beings, and the film's argument is that it must also be true on the level of the whole metropolis, for society at large. If the city is to be treated as a single organism, then it too has a brain and hands. The brain of Metropolis is represented by its master, Jo Fredriksson, and his company of academic elites occupying high-rise buildings above ground. The hands of Metropolis are represented by its workers, who slave away beneath the ground to keep the machines turning. The film's assertion is that society falls apart when there is a disconnect between these two levels, when there is disconnect between the head of society and the hands of society. Hierarchy isn't a problem in and of itself, but corruption develops when hierarchy is used to heartlessly crush the working class and keep them separated from everyone else. Two key biblical references are made to emphasize this problem. Below ground, the machines are likened to the temple of Moloch, a Canaanite god with an insatiable desire for human sacrifices. And above ground, Jo Fredriksson's headquarters are situated in a building called the Tower of Babel. Now, we read about the original Tower of Babel in the ancient Hebrew text of Genesis, after the incident of Noah and the flood. And I think the explanatory power of this very short story in the context of Metropolis and Megalopolis is extraordinary. Let's check it out. Now, the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. Babel is humanity's attempt to reach the heavens on its own terms, rather than on God's terms. And in Metropolis we even see the character Maria tell a version of the Babel story to her fellow underground workers. She says, "The minds that had conceived the Tower of Babel could not build it. The task was too great, so they hired hands for wages. But the hands that built the Tower of Babel knew nothing of the dream of the brain that had conceived it. One man's hymns of praise became other men's curses. People spoke the same language but could not understand each other. Head and hands need a mediator. The mediator between head and hands must be the heart." There's that line again. It's a revealing reinterpretation of the Babel story. To Maria, the problem with the Tower of Babel was the lack of communication between its designers and its builders. If only there had been a heartfelt person to mediate between the designers and the builders, then all would have been well. The Bible frames the issue differently. God sees that every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. The corruption runs deeper than the lack of middle management involved in the tower's construction. No, Babel is a flawed project from the outset because it is predicated upon mankind's desire to make a name for itself rather than receiving a name from God. It's the hubris of it. That's the problem. But the Hebrew scriptures do more than diagnose the problem, they testify to the solution. In Ezekiel, God himself says this, "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh." It's not that we build a tower up to God. No, he comes down and he offers us new hearts. Whatever you make of it, that is the promise of the Judeo-Christian scriptures, and Metropolis does end up reflecting something of that. The son of the city's creator descends down into the underworld, taking the form of a servant, and he is the promised mediator. He is the heartfelt man who makes peace between the minds of the city and the hands of the city. The Christian parallels are almost unmissable, especially when you read St. Paul's letter to the Philippians. Jesus, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. Being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. So that self-sacrificial love of God demonstrated on the cross, making peace with the scattered people of earth, that is reflected in some small way by the mediator in the film Metropolis. And now in 2024, Francis Ford Coppola releases his Megalopolis, a film inspired by Metropolis. And for additional source material, he turns not to the Bible, but to pre-Christian Rome. Caesar Catilina's dialogue throughout the film is revealing. He says things like, "When you leap into the unknown, you prove that we are free. But if it's our minds that can invent gods, and if from them flows such power, why can't we apply that power directly? Our Mother Earth gave us the genius to see a future so beautiful that we cannot see it denied. The gates of Megalopolis are open." If Metropolis fell short in denouncing the lie of Babel, Megalopolis swallows it wholesale. According to Megalopolis, humanity can return itself to the Garden of Eden through its own genius. And that rings hollow because, deep down, we know it to be a lie. I wouldn't recommend Megalopolis, I'm afraid. I mean, aside from its muddled and ultimately rather vacuous message, it's a bit of a slog of a film, but I would recommend Metropolis. Well, that's my take on the film. I'd love to hear what you think. My name is Thomas Thorogood. I get into the deeper meaning of movies. Do subscribe if you'd like to stay in the loop. Thanks so much for watching.